These days, fake news is everywhere, perhaps eclipsed only by the coverage of fake news, and it's becoming a growing problem. A recent experiment that was run showed that fake news headlines which were made up from whole cloth, had no basis in the facts, purposefully made up for this experiment, fooled Americans 75% of the time. Adults. And when you talk to people, they say about 1/3 say they see fake news in their social media feeds every single day, and more than half have started to read an article before realizing that it was fake news. That bit, of course, is good news because at least they realized it. Many never actually realize it, and today in this video we're going to break down all the ins and outs of this incredibly sticky topic. We're going to start here because, of course, people have been attempting to define this, and gradually, over the past few weeks, the definition has grown more and more expansive. But really, this isn't that complicated. Fake news does have a meaning. Here's what fake news is. I start a website. My goal is to purposefully fool people into thinking something isn't true is true. So I write up an article. I make it look like a real article. It's got a headline, it's got some paragraphs, perhaps a picture, but nothing that I say in it is actually true, or at least the core claim isn't. That is then spread tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of times all over your social media. That is what fake news is. It is news that is specifically crafted to fool people into believing untrue things. Now, if you don't think that this is actually a problem, if you don't think this actually exists, then you need to read some of the interviews with the people who are running these websites, because they make very clear that is exactly what they were trying to do. And many of them, before the election, said they were trying to influence the election. So that is fake news. Now, there are many things that are floating around that are not fake news, but they're still bad in various ways. We're going to break down both the bad and the normal. Now, editorializing opinion, that's not fake news. Me saying what I think is going to happen or what I think might be is not fake news. It's generally not even news. It's simply opinion. Whether conservative or liberal, it's not fake news. Conspiracy theorizing is not necessarily fake news. Now, very often the problem with conspiracy theories are they take some things that are actually true and verifiable, and then they spin elaborate webs around that where everybody is hiding things from other people, and they draw conclusions that simply aren't true. But it's not by its very nature fake news, because the people who are peddling the conspiracy theories, in some cases, are not purposefully trying to mislead people. They are simply wrong. Let's also add news that you don't agree with is not necessarily fake news. If you don't like that a story is being discussed, if you don't like the angle that a particular anchor or commentator takes on a story, that doesn't necessarily make it fake news. Now, while I think we can all agree that there's perhaps been a little bit too much commentary that doesn't really accomplish much about fake news, it is good that it's being discussed, because I think people are starting to understand that they can't necessarily trust something simply because their auntie shared it on Facebook. People are starting to understand that there are big credibility gaps between different media outlets. And while you should be suspicious of all news and make sure to verify, there are some sources that are more credible than others. So let's take a look at this chart here, coming from Morning Consult. You'll see that the most trusted, most credible news sources, that most people think anyway, are ABC and CBS, NBC, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNN, and those sorts of things, sort of standard news outlets. Now, these news outlets, almost without exception, have significant problems of their own. And simply because they don't often publish things that are demonstrably untrue does not mean that you should read them uncritically, or that you can trust the things that they print even if they are true. They certainly have their biases. They cover some stories and don't cover others. You have to be critical. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's fake news. And look, even Fox is considered credible or very credible by 55% of the people taking this survey. Now, oddly enough, NPR definitely has a perspective. I get this, but I don't think they very often just make up stuff. Huffington Post doing okay there, although lower than some of the others. And here is where the good news comes, because people do understand that while, Donald Trump had his cronies in the white supremacist media and the conspiracy theorists, and they've won, that does not mean that people think that they are credible. It doesn't mean that people go to their sites. So look at these numbers. For Breitbart, 19% of people say that they're either very credible or credible. And understand this, credible is probably selected by a lot of people who don't know what the source is. People are fairly agreeable on surveys. And rather than saying, well, I don't know what it is, so I'll say it's not credible, credible seems fair. But they're only at 19%. Next up is The Onion, which is considered as credible as Breitbart and more credible than InfoWars. The Onion is specifically designed to make you laugh. There's no truth in The Onion, it's simply jokes, and yet people still trust it more than one of the better-known conspiracy theory websites. Now, the reason that I think it's important to highlight them is, while you can believe various conspiracy theories, and as I said earlier, ground them in truth, and the desire is to discover what's actually going on, I mean, some of these websites that people don't trust, they're just known to simply make shit up. They have an audience that wants extreme bullshit. Many of the people watching them probably don't even consider it news. They just think it's fun, like watching the WWE or something. And so they have to think up crazier and crazier nonsense involving aliens and lizard people, and crisis actors and things like that. Now, of course, you have no obligation to do anything about this. I mean, if you want to make sure that what you believe is congruent with the real world, then you can do that by going to sites that have a track record of being trustworthy, supplementing it with a wide variety of different sources and perspectives, and making sure to check the facts that you form your opinions around, and that help to inform what your policy preferences are. Now, if you do want to go a little bit farther than that and try to help out some other people, then perhaps share some articles that aren't necessarily story articles, but that are about how you identify whether a story is likely to be true or not, how you analyze headlines, how you check if photographs are true, how you check the basic claims of a story. Share that information. It's sort of the fisherman thing, you know? If you tell someone an article is untrue, then he eats for that day. If you teach him how to figure out if an article is true or not, then he can read for the rest of his days. And this is something that I, of course, care about because I am in the news business, regardless of what my title actually might be or what I really consider myself to hold, what position. I do care about the truth, and that is why I am here, to try to move myself, and if it helps anyone else, someone else as well, towards a better understanding of the real world and what we can do to make it better. Fake news, conspiracy theorizing, and all those things are not the same, but all of them work against a better, more fuller, more accurate understanding of reality, and it needs to be stopped.